This lesson shows how to multiply and divide with negative numbers. You already know that the product of two positive numbers is positive. You knew that before you even heard of positive or negative numbers. For example, positive 4 times positive 3 equals positive 12. But before moving on, stop and think what this means. 4 times 3 means 4 groups of 3, or 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, which add up to 12. 4 groups of 3 is 12. Now let's look at 4 times negative 3. This must mean 4 groups of negative 3, which would be negative 3 plus negative 3 plus negative 3 plus negative 3, which is negative 12. So from this simple example, it should seem reasonable that the product of a positive and a negative number is negative. Now let's look at negative 4 times negative 3, the product of two negative numbers. You can't explain this product as negative 4 groups of negative 3 because you can't have negative 4 groups of anything. It turns out that the product of two negative numbers is positive, and it's easy to understand. Recall the inverse property of addition from a previous lesson. For any number m, the inverse of the number is written as negative m, or the opposite of m. The sum of a number and its inverse is 0. For example, negative 4 is the inverse of positive 4, and positive 3 is the inverse of negative 3. Now, notice when you multiply 3 by negative 1, you get negative 3, the inverse of 3. So it would make sense that when you multiply negative 3 by negative 1, you get the inverse of negative 3, which is positive 3. This is the multiplication property of negative 1, which says when you multiply a number by negative 1, you get its inverse. So to multiply negative 4 times negative 3, use the multiplication property of negative 1 to rewrite negative 4 as negative 1 times 4. Then use the associative property to regroup the product. Next, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Then using the multiplication property of negative 1 again, negative 1 times negative 12 is the inverse of negative 12, or positive 12. And so you can see the product of two negative numbers is positive. Here's how the rules for multiplying with negative numbers are written. Since the product of a positive and a negative number is the product of numbers with different signs, the first rule is the product of numbers with different signs is negative. For example, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12, and negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. The second rule is the product of numbers with the same sign is positive. For example, negative 5 times negative 4 is 20, and 4 times 8 is 32. Different signs, negative, same signs, positive. The rules for dividing with negative numbers are similar because of the relationship between division and multiplication. Since 2 times 8 is 16, you know that 16 divided by 8 is 2. And also, 16 divided by 2 is 8. So, since negative 2 times 8 is negative 16, you can see negative 16 divided by negative 2 is positive 8, which shows the quotient of two negative numbers is positive. Also, since negative 2 times negative 8 equals 16, you can see that 16 divided by negative 2 is equal to negative 8, which shows the quotient of a positive and a negative number is negative. Here's how the rules for dividing with negative numbers are written. The quotient of numbers with different signs is negative. For example, negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. And the quotient of numbers with the same sign is positive. For example, negative 36 divided by negative 4 equals 9. This lesson showed how to multiply and divide with negative numbers. And this lesson was brought to you by the Math Fun Academy. Its continuing mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new math and new equations, to boldly go where no math student has gone before.